Welcome to the Grow Your Business podcast. Listen in as we discuss all things business, growth, and marketing with business owners, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, founder of Roundhouse, the creative agency, Saul Edmonds.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Grow Your Business podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Jeff Jaraved about the changing nature of digital advertising. Jeff, how are you going today?
I'm very well, Saul. How are you?
Really good too. Thank you for asking. That's very nice of you. Thanks so much for jumping on the podcast today. It's really great to talk to you. I understand, Jeff, you are the lead engineer at something called Cassie. Is that correct?
That is correct. I am the lead engineer at Cassie.
Would you like to, for everyone listening, just as a first thing that we're talking about, just give everyone a little bit of an outline of yourself, what Cassie is, or history as an overview?
Sure. I guess I'll start with Cassie because my history is a little bit will take a bit of a long time to cover. But Cassie is basically a digital marketing platform. You know, she's an app that allows you to essentially advertise on billboards the same way you would typically advertise on Google, on Facebook. So all you need is a laptop. You essentially just log into Cassie, pick the billboards that you want, and advertise on there. I think the big thing about Cassie is that she's a pay-per-play system. So what that essentially means is that you only pay for what you consume. You only pay for the ads that play. And you know the other advantage that comes with that is the ability to, you know, if you just wanted to target peak hour with a certain message, you can pick any billboard, any city you like, and just say, I want to have my message in peak hour be this, my message at nighttime be this, and if you find that campaign or that particular message is not working for you, you can just change it like that. So it's in that sense, it's quite a new concept, because traditionally with billboards, it's, you know, they're booked in 1 month, or booked through the lunar cycle. So every lunar cycle they book the ads. So it means that you're typically stuck with a message for that duration of time. And we saw this happen a lot with some of the companies advertising on billboards, even the digital billboards, when the coronavirus started to hit Australia. We had messaging that was completely irrelevant, when people were being locked down, but these companies were stuck and locked in with these messages.
Right.
And that's one of those areas that, a platform like Cassie, which would allow you to just flick a switch or, just upload a new ad just like that. It would be, super useful. And that's what we're seeing here, that, that's one of the big advantages is how quick it can be to go from, just an idea to a campaign.
Yeah. Do you think that's like, I would imagine, not really having a lot of experience myself with ever doing any advertising, say on billboards, but my assumption has always been that, sort of what you were saying, that there's a certain, an element of being then locked into something. And given that a lot of people's experience in other forms of advertising is that they've got so much flexibility, the idea of Cassie, even just on the face of it with you describing it, sounds incredibly appealing, because it's all about, people's kind of automation, things being quick, things they can do remotely. Is like, it takes something that has never been like that to a next level. So Is it just on that sort of topic, is there anything else kind of like Cassie out there, or is it really like a world first sort of idea?
It's definitely not a world first. I mean, we've this concept has been sort of pops up every now and then, like or it has in the past. It's there's been a few companies that tried it in the past, but the infrastructure just didn't exist at that time.
Yeah.
I think like because obviously once Facebook and Google did it, the next obvious application was, doing it for billboards, doing it for radio, doing it for TV. But the problem is that, even though these digital billboards are just, well, they're the same as your mobile phones. Like, they're just screens out they just happen to be fixed on the side of the road, right? But they don't really work that way. There's a lot more infrastructure that goes in, and there's a lot of complexity in the systems that manage these billboards, that actually wiring them up and connecting them to the internet is a lot more tedious than it should be, if I'm honest. So it's like, each of these media owners, for example, they have to manually upload their screens to say a server or a database that makes them available to the world. And for a lot of the media owners, it's an expensive task. And I think that's where, they've had that sticking point, back in, say, so I think the first time it popped up was around the 2015 mark. And I think it sort of fizzled out at that point. We had the idea, at around 2017 to do this, and then we were just observing, how other people have tried to do it, and we were looking at it and thinking, okay, why is it that it hasn't really taken a hold yet? And it seems to be, what we're finding now is there's just a lot of administrative difficulties with making the screens available. And for us, on the flip side, there's that difficulty of getting people aware of the fact that they can buy billboards or get ads on billboards now without that commitment. Because there is that mental association where you go, billboards, oh no, I need to buy that a month in advance, so I need to buy a month of it. And you have to convince people that no, we're actually selling it, on a real time basis. So you only, pay for whenever your ad actually plays. And then as we try and explain that, there's that education that needs to happen, and we hit another barrier which we didn't expect. But people think that. Okay, so one of the things we do, the way we sell, is to make it appealing to the media owners. We say that we're going to fill vacancies, because that's one of the things that's happened as digital billboards have become a thing. They've had their you can fit 10 clients per digital billboard, but the media owners don't really have the sales staff to be able to fill all of that all the time. So they've run at something like a 30 to 50% vacancy that could be filled. So we come in and say, hey, look, you've got those vacant spaces. We can just automatically fill those for you, because people come through Cassie. They just want, a little bit of advertising here and there. And they want to experiment, play with it, etc. And that goes well. But the problem is when we then start to say that to users who come in, they think, oh, does that mean when you're saying vacancies, am I only going to get an ad at 4:00 in the morning?
You're right.
That's one of those additional barriers that we hit, and we go, no, you're not just getting time slots in the middle of the night. You're actually taking up the position of one of those 10 people in that who are allocated to that billboard or allocated to those multiple billboards. So the problem, I guess, for us is that it's still a lot to try and explain this in a simple, easy to grasp way.
Unlearning, I suppose, isn't it? Like it's unlearning. It's an education process, but also then unlearning, because, like I was sort of saying before, like my, even my impression, like I think most people, is kind of the opposite then of what people are used to with pay per click, like on Facebook or anywhere. What they're used to with that, because they're used to this idea of, they understand that it's you pay when somebody actually clicks on it. But then taking that similar idea to something where people are looking at it, but then, re-educating around how that actually works. I would, you talking about it kind of makes my head spin a little bit about how you would have to, it's a process. It's obviously for a lot of people, it would take a while to do it. But I think like certainly the way that you are doing it visually too is on the site is really great. Like it's I mean, I always have a tendency to where appropriate, obviously, to make things in such a way that they're, one, enjoyable, two, they're going to be easy to understand, and a little bit fun too, like the idea of Cassie, which you can then talk about a little bit more, is that it's certainly got a bit of a playful nature to it, which I really like, and I'm sure is like hugely appealing to a lot of different people when they're first, which I would imagine, and you can sort of, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on this as to whether you've have any feedback from people thinking about or sort of commenting on that, sort of helping in either that education process and the explaining of what it is, because it's enjoyable and because it's, and the visuals are so good and sort of playful. Have you had any feedback from people around that?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think we've had a lot of comments on that. Everything that we do is on brand in the sense that all the communications come from Cassie as a fictional character, a robot. So usually, like a social media posts are typically Cassie talking about something or saying the humans are up to this or up to that. So it actually is. It sets us apart in a number of ways, in that most of the people in our space are very, very enterprise-oriented companies. We're one of two companies globally that essentially offer the ability to just do the pay-per-play without having to pay a subscription. I think that that puts us in a different category, and that almost makes us a consumer-level product. And I think the ultimate dream for us is to actually become that platform that people would go to say, look, my partner lives over here, and she's near a billboard. I might just put up a "Will you marry me" message up on that billboard, and we that's where we really want to go. And I think what we've had, is that feedback that, and it resonates with that idea. Is I guess what I can say is that people are saying that she's really relatable. She's fun to deal with, and she's got personality, which is something that some of a lot of other companies don't really invest in. So for us, that's been important, and it has been recognized. The other aspect is the actual design of the app itself. That's something that is a huge focus for us, is to try and make it user friendly, because we don't want to be the app that's used by or exclusive to experts alone. We want to be the app that can be picked up by anyone and just gone with. It does make life difficult for us in that we can't just introduce new features like that. We've got to actually think about how's the user experience? Are people going to be comfortable doing it this way? What are people saying about this? So there's it's been good. It's definitely been rewarding because people have noticed. People have noticed Cassie. They've noticed the UI. They've noticed pretty much everything that we've rolled out has been met with positive feedback. There have been a few incidents that had some negative feedback. We recently accidentally sent out emails. It was supposed to happen once on the first day of the month. Instead, it happened once every minute on the first day of the month, which it worked really well for an April Fool's joke, but it was actually really embarrassing when it did happen. So, we've had a full mix of things go on.
Such is the nature of where a design meets function, I suppose, isn't it? When you go, these things always happen. I mean, I can imagine, as people like who are in your industry too, like I don't think it can really be understated in who, no matter who the client is, who's looking at it, the importance of good user interface and good, user experience. I don't really believe that. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously people who are a little bit who have more expertise. They might understand something that isn't as user friendly, but I don't think that's like a reason then not to make a really great user experience. Despite that, that it's not. I think good design is important no matter what it is, and your emphasis on that, obviously as designers too, has been really great. So within what you're doing, what's you as the lead engineer, what have you actually been doing, and what do you do ongoing within the business?
A bit of everything, really. But I mean, like my primary role is to build it. Obviously as the engineer. But there are, I do help with the strategy and where we're going, the concept as a whole. I think we all put our heads together for that. We're still a small team, and I think that we still behave like a small team, and that we all share the burden of like even going out and talking about it and selling and doing all of that sort of stuff. A lot of it does fall in my lap. I think right now the way we sort of split our roles is just by we all do exactly or pretty much roughly the same thing, and then every now and then someone would have a little bit of expertise in a certain area that they then they take that task and go, I'm gonna be in charge of that. So in my case, that's the coding and putting it online and making sure everything is working. That's my area. Like Taryn, for example, she handles a lot of the blog writing and the content, and she mans our Facebook and all the social media profiles. So if ever you see something that's written in Cassie speak, it's pretty much always Taryn. So it's Taryn being
so
Cassie.
She is the puppet master. She is.
She absolutely is.
Yeah, I mean,
on a dime, it's quite uncanny, really.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, I think that's a really interesting kind of aspect too, because I love, personally, I think people also really enjoy finding out in whatever enterprise it is, those little kind of other stories that make up, something that has been created. It might not be, necessarily a part of the selling of it, because it usually isn't, but it certainly adds a real human element to it, which is kind of, I guess, a little bit of a segue into the next thing I was just going to talk about, which is the idea of, like the topic is about, the changing nature of digital advertising, right? So, where we've already talked about billboards and where they have been. Now, the majority, I mean, I haven't been observant enough to go around and see every single billboard and see whether it's digital now, but from my general observations, most seem to be now. There's still some that are obviously not digital, but given that, and given that there's that interaction with people in a completely different way, through them either driving past or walking past, or they're near a cafe, and then those are the billboards you see in shopping centres. Given that, plus people's sort of exposure to digital advertising in all its forms, in terms of via Google ads and Facebook, that people are so exposed to it. I just wonder, and I really like to hear your thoughts on this, as to whether from your perspective and how you're currently thinking about Cassie, and given like the current landscape, do you see some point where all those various kind of avenues that are already out there, plus things like Cassie and the avenues that it advertises on billboards, that there's a point where all of that becomes far more centralized, like in one source, or that they're or have you even been, sort of exploring that idea just in your creative process?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a very interesting question, and only time will really tell where this whole thing goes. I think for the most part, and for decades, I mean, billboards are, I think, the oldest advertising format. I think.
Yeah, right.
2000, something like that. It's been around for 4,000 odd years. And I think it's only the last 10 years or so that it started to really ramp up in terms of changing. There has been one of the issues, I think, is the way we still think about the formats like billboards. They're still heavily sold on a direct basis. So, for example, you'd have a salesperson go out to a client and then say that, I've got these billboards. Do you want to use them for this month? Something like that. And a lot of companies have been built around that. So even the media owners, the vast majority of their company is built on sales. So they have a huge sales team. And one of the issues that, sort of arise out of that is with something like Cassie, that poses, in a way, a massive threat to that way of selling. And that creates a bit of sort of fear around what Cassie can do, or a platform like Cassie can do in terms of job security and all of that. So those sorts of things start coming in, like, the robots are going to take our jobs, sort of thing. And so whilst, I could say, yes, there's going to be in the future, it's going to be like Facebook. You go onto one platform, you sign in, and all the billboards are going to be available there, and billboard owners can then focus on building good billboards. I'm not sure how that's actually going to pan out, because there's a lot of variables in there. I mean, I do expect that in the next 10 years, that's going to become very much the case. That billboard owners are going to shift from shift from investment in sales to investment in technology, while platforms like us just feed ads directly to them. I think it's anyone's guess right now as to how comfortable they are going that way. I mean, I'd say it's definitely going to go that way. It's mostly just a question of how long it's going to be before we think it's appropriate to start pushing in that direction.
Yeah,
I mean, we want to coexist with direct sales. We don't want to replace it. We want because we still think there's a place for buying campaigns ahead of time, buying long campaigns, and a lot of big brands, definitely that's the most suitable way to go, because they plan their campaigns months in advance. But a lot of smaller businesses, that's just not feasible, and I think that's where we want to sit, and that's where I expect us to sit for a long period of time before the technology becomes overwhelmingly the de facto standard of buying outdoor ads.
Yeah, I think you certainly. I mean, like, nobody can see the future, right? So, but what we do kind of know, like, the only thing that I guess part of that question was also about different observations that I've had to do with, say, automation, and like the changing nature of digital advertising in many ways is very closely aligned to like the very rapidly changing nature of automation in CRMs, and then all the like the very open sort of engagement that most of like the big CRMs have with different marketing platforms, and like all the integrations that they have through their APIs with everything, and that everyone, realizing, I think that people they kind of want the ultimate solution where everything is in one platform. But I don't think, I'd be really interested to see what you think, like given what you do as well, whether you think that's, never going to happen. Because personally, I don't think that would ever happen, and because it's been tried time and time again. But what has happened though is that there's been really great integrations that are around with lots of CRMs and websites and other marketing platforms that integrate with other tools. And there's a lot of different variables in there, like there's hundreds of them. But like the fact still is that I don't think the ultimate solution would ever exist, because there's too many variables, to be able to do that.
So I think what's been happening recently, I'm not sure how long this has been happening for. We went through a phase where it was only ever the big 4 or 5 companies that came up with software tools. You had Google, you had Microsoft, IBM often came up with a few things. And they were, in that sense, they were centralized to those 4 big companies. But what's been happening recently has been, we've been having startups that pop up here and there with offering specialist tools that do a really good job in one specific thing. And you have a lot of them for many different tasks. So what ends up happening is, instead of having a centralized platform that does everything, we've got a distribution of different platforms that do different things really well. And it becomes more important for, say, the service provider, the marketer, to then know, all right, I'm going to use this tool because it's my personal preference for doing the outdoor ads. I'm going to use this tool for doing the social media ads. I'm going to use this tool for CRM. Since these platforms, as you rightly said, have all these APIs and integrations happening, they all just seamlessly talk to each other, and you don't have a need anymore for one platform that does it all. You just have a need for every platform to have an API or have some way to connect to other platforms.
Yeah, then a good API too. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, like a good, not just an API, but like a good API. Because that's the key for people out there who don't know what an API is, who are listening. It's kind of the essentially something that doesn't usually just exist on its own within any piece of software. It has to be built in order to enable other software to connect with it, to access the right information in order to do what it has to do. And like a good one will do that well, sort of in simple terms. But yeah, I mean, I certainly think, just going back to good user interface and good design, is, I don't know about you, but I think apart from really good functionality in your CRMs, in Cassie, in MailChimp, in like anything that is connected, I think a really big part of people's decision-making process actually comes down to what they like and what feels good to them. And that's just purely, from my perspective anyway, that's purely design. That's almost solely a design-based kind of decision, because there's a lot of really similar functionality. Like, you do things in a similar way in a lot of CRMs, you do it in a similar way, in various things. So if you really look at it, the deciding factor, one often doesn't do things that are greatly different from another one. Obviously, Cassie's a really different thing altogether, but still, there's ultimately, you've got, you log in and you do this and you do that. But how it looks and feels is, I think, really important, to...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know, because obviously So as a coder, I mean, you mentioned APIs and the ease of, like a good API. I think that also boils down, that's user interface in its own way.
Yeah, right.
API that you can really easily connect to and not have to think too hard about. It really factors into the decision-making process. I know for us, for example, we went through multiple ways of trying to host Cassie. The easiest one was a platform called Heroku. That one, and I have not yet found anything that was quite as simple. Because at the beginning of the project, none of us knew what we were doing. I mean, there's no easy way of putting that. We had no idea. And Heroku was so good that you didn't need to know anything to be able to put your app up and have it just work.
I think I've had some experience with that, actually. That rings a bell. But just explain very briefly what it does.
So if you had an app, say you built some code or something like that, and you wanted to post it on a some kind of website, so to speak, Heroku is a platform that you can just upload your code to, and it would automatically handle pretty much making it available online for anyone to use. It is by far the easiest one that I have used yet. I mean, not to take away from the point we made earlier, but unfortunately we're not still using Heroku because even though it was so easy to use, I really wish I was still using it.
It was great when you were using it.
Well, it still would be. It's just it's just cost prohibitive for us at the moment just because of the way we've structured everything. We made some uninformed decisions in the past that came back to bite us in terms of cost per use and all of that. And if we use Heroku, our database costs just skyrocket. So so there are some trade-offs, but for the most part, it was just phenomenally simple. I remember even because we're on AWS at the moment using them directly. So Heroku essentially uses AWS in the background, but it just abstracts you from it. So it gives you this really nice user interface, this really easy to understand thing. Yeah. You don't have to deal with what's actually going on in the background. Which is
a very appealing idea, I think, for everyone.
Exactly. That abstraction was perfect for us when we were learning. We didn't know what we were doing. I mean, not that I know what I'm doing now, but I spent the last week or so trying to cut down our AWS costs, and I managed to somehow make it go up. There is so I mean that's one thing I can say, that AWS is one of those examples of very powerful software, but not very user friendly software.
I would say I would echo that very, very strongly. Great, but you just have to dive in, and you got to keep using it, even just to get your head around how it all works. It doesn't necessarily look bad, but it's like a rabbit warren. You just where's the rabbit? I need to find the rabbit. I have no idea where it is.
I mean, honestly, trying to find the one setting you need to change, this haystack of just multiple things that could go wrong, and you're like, I don't know what to touch. I don't know if I broke it from doing this thing or doing that, but it broke. And we go through that quite a lot. But yeah, look, I think Heroku is one of the many that have appeared in the last few years because of this problem. Even as developers, you think you're good at something when you make the code. You think that's the challenging part, but no, the challenging part is actually putting that up online. Making that code available to be used as an app is actually vastly more difficult than writing the code to start with. So that's been my experience. I think there's a reason why there's actually people whose entire degrees, I think they're called DevOps engineers, who predominantly their entire role is to take your code and put it up in a seamless way. So you just go, I've made this thing. Can you just make it available on AWS, please? because I've got no idea what I'm doing. I know I'm breaking it.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, there's only so much information that people can get their head around. No matter how experienced you are. And I think one of the things which has always been our experience too, doing apps and thinking about apps and with different scope is constantly reminded that despite the fact that the general impression of development is kind of straightforward and logical, and that you do one thing and that equals another, is that it's kind of the complete opposite of that. It's incredibly much trial and error and mistakes, and you don't always realize things until you've done them, and then you have to repair them. And that's kind of the nature of a lot of development, given the fact then that other things that you're integrating with, you don't have any control over, and you don't necessarily know when those things are going to be changed. But it is, I completely understand and can appreciate the fact that there's, especially given what you're doing, that there's a very organic process that you had to go through. And that's I mean, the product at the moment looks fantastic, and it works really well. I'm sure it's only like you said, you're still going through that process. I'm sure it's never going to end, really.
No.
Yeah.
No, that's one thing that we I guess take for I wouldn't say necessarily take for granted, but you think you're building an app, you think it's a one-time sort of thing, but programming is not really it doesn't really have an end date to it. You're always developing, you're always adding something new or fixing something. There's just an endless list of things that go wrong all the time, and you're always just part of your life as a developer is just putting out fires as they arise. There's and
of course,
that's just the nature of what it is.
What does just on another sort of topic, for people listening too, they'll we'll get you to give them at the end of the podcast just a link and information about Cassie. But where does what locations at the current time does Cassie actually serve in Australia-wide and worldwide?
For the most part, most of our inventory is actually overseas. I mean, Australia is still relatively new to the game. We have inventory in all the major cities in Australia. Melbourne's obviously the most densely packed with screens. Well, sorry, I should say the Gold Coast is. There's I think 90 bus shelter screens in the Gold Coast. So every single bus shelter in the Gold Coast that has a digital screen on it, we have access to. We've got a few, 6 or 7, I think 7 screens in Brisbane City. I think Melbourne's got something like 20. So I think there's a total of 160 screens across Australia, with more coming through as more of the media owners get on board. We just had about 3,500 new screens pop up in the United States, which was a fun experience because it hit our system hard. It was an influx of screens, and we were like, whoa, where did that come from? So the most populated country in terms of screens is the United States. I think it's followed by Dubai, the UAE, and then the Netherlands, and don't actually know where else. I'd have to check the map. But there's a few countries. We've got technically access. So those are the ones that are readily available right now that you can play on Cassie. We've got access, so an API integration to about another 40,000 across the world that can be activated as we have questions and demand for those. So if anyone said, I want some screens in the UK, we could make that happen as well.
Yeah.
We just sort of we haven't really gone there because we're focusing mostly locally. But if anyone had the need to advertise in the US or in Europe, it's definitely a whole lot more. There's just a whole lot more screens. We're talking thousands of them over there, whereas we're talking maybe hundreds here in Australia at the moment.
Yeah, because I guess it's still, like we've already been talking about, it's still a relatively new way for like a lot of people to start using. And with that too, what type of, have you got any like current data and information that about types of industries that have been using cAAsie more than others, or has it been, quite broad?
Well, at the moment, we don't have enough in the way of data to be able to say for sure. But we've had 100% of the people who've actually used cAAsie have never used billboards before. They've come from the digital space. They're used to Facebook ads, they're used to Google ads, and using Facebook has just been, not Facebook. Using cAAsie has been for them, it's like a more user-friendly way of essentially doing Facebook ads, just on billboards. So it's been interesting. We've had a couple of most of our interest sort of comes from the real estate space, which was interesting for us. Then we had another person advertise an app. I think the most recent publicity one that we did was a B2B company that they never really faced the public at all. Except on their website, obviously. But for them, they use cAAsie as a way to thank their staff and their customers, and they just did it I think,
and then to put it out there for the public to see.
Yeah, and I mean the advantage they had was that they did a photo shoot, which turned into a video, which went on their social media, it went on a blog post, and that's for them. It wasn't the billboard itself, but what came with it that was the huge benefit for them. Likewise for us, when we, as soon as I'm not sure if you heard about the truck that caught on fire on the gateway.
I did, yeah.
It was carrying toilet paper rolls, and it was perfect. It was just the day after I think the news picked up the idea that all these people were hoarding toilet paper, and it was a perfect opportunity for us. We thought, between two meetings, we just went. We were like, we should just put up an ad or a message on one of these billboards that says, cAAsie should have been a toilet paper company, and we'd have made a whole lot more money doing that instead. So we went ahead, took 5 minutes. We designed an artwork, put it up, and between meetings, we took some photos of it, and we just ran that ad for the day, and it ended up costing us something like $20, and it was totally worth it for the social media posts that came out of that, because we were capitalizing on a trend. We were, we were there capitalizing on the trend before any of the other bigger companies had caught up.
In a specific location too. I mean, I can see just even you talking about that is starting to get my mind kind of crazy racing about really interesting location specific sort of campaigns that there's going to be that you could integrate with stuff you're doing online. But if either there's going to be eyes constantly in a certain area and you're doing other things online, that integration between whatever that messaging is, I mean, like with that particular example, but then specifically in an area, I think there's a kind of a nice, I was just imagining that scenario, and there's a nice, almost, maybe not accurate to go so far as to say magical, but if you're going past something physically and then all of a sudden you see something kind of related to something you've seen online, it's to me, that would be sort of remarkable. It'd be kind of like, how could that happen? That it's, especially if it's specific to something either about the location and you just happen to be going past. I mean, that's that gives, I think, a lot of interesting scope for really great potential creative new ideas, ways of handling advertising.
Yes, I fully agree. I think for us, that's one of the directions where we're trying to go in, is to bring that whole ecosystem, because it really is an ecosystem of ads or advertising or marketing that you're doing. And you don't typically use Cassie in isolation of Facebook and Google and all the other platforms. I mean, what we want ultimately is that ease in which you can say, I'm going to create a campaign and I'm going to have it link up with each of these other campaigns that I'm running. So the message is consistent, it's relevant at the right time. We're still sort of waiting for Facebook to make their APIs a little bit more, open. Right now, I think what we found, I've only briefly researched it, Facebook is trying to keep their cards close to their chest. They don't want to open it as much as we'd like. But I think that, in time, if they do, it will be extremely powerful with all these platforms showing up. If you can link up your sales data with your I think you can currently do that. Say it comes with HubSpot. If you can link that up with your Facebook campaigns, you can see who's interacting with it, where they came from, what stage of the life cycle they're in, all those sorts of things. But like for us, that goal is to factor Cassie in there and say, these people were exposed to this Cassie ad. They're more likely to therefore interact with your online advertising. You should target them on their phones, or you should target them when they're visiting certain websites. I think that is definitely the direction in which we're going. We just need to make sure that the APIs are all available to make that a reality. I think there is a sort of tendency for the bigger companies to want to own it all.
100%.
But I think with enough small companies popping up here and there, there's going to be enough pressure for them to think, hey, if we do open this up, they can benefit too out of that. Because we're not taking away from Facebook advertising, we're just making it more effective.
Yeah. So no offers from Facebook yet to buy Cassie?
Not yet. No.
Well, I wouldn't be. I mean, a good idea is a good idea as far as I'm concerned, and that's what all the big companies know that too, obviously. But I think it's absolutely fantastic. But with that in mind too, I'll just as we're wrapping things up, I'll just ask you, if you wouldn't mind, Jeff, to give us a quote, like a relevant quote, or just a quote that you like, sort of related to things we've been talking about, or like I said, just one that you think is great.
Oh, well, I don't really know. Yeah, I came up with one just as you mentioned it before the podcast, and I was like, yeah, well, I'll try and think of something, and I did think of something, and it is relevant. I think what I want to say is, we always think of the digital media and traditional media. We lump billboards being one of them into the traditional media. We think of them as two distinct types of advertising. I think what we've learned over the last 5 years, or actually last 10 years or so, is that those lines that keep them apart, they're quickly blurring. We're having billboards becoming more and more digital, and now, with things like Cassie, they're starting to become more online. So soon enough, there's going to be platforms online. You wouldn't even have to get off your phone to manage a campaign across Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, billboards, TV, radio, and have all of it available at your fingertips without ever having to pick up a phone and call anyone.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's already happening with a lot of other things, but I think it's incredibly interesting. And just off the back of that too, could I get you to just let everyone know also about what the URL of Cassie is? What's the best way to get in contact with you guys?
Sure. Yeah. You can go to our website, which is cAAsie.co, CAASIE.co. And you can also email me directly at jeff@cAAsie.co. So Jeff spelled Jeff, and obviously at cAAsie.co. Don't forget the 2 A's, because that's the one thing that trips everyone up.
2 A's. So cAAsie.co. Cass as in sass. Sassy.
Yeah, it's like that. But it actually stands for contextually aware advertising system.
Yeah.
So that's where we're aiming to go. So make your advertising more intelligent, beyond just picking a billboard or picking a mobile phone and advertising to it. It's about advertising to the right person at the right time when they need your message.
Super relevant, super great idea too. Thanks. Thank you so much, Jeff, for the for your time today. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
No, it's my pleasure. So with that in mind, that's actually it for today, guys. Thanks so much for listening into our podcast yet again. Please leave your feedback as well as any suggestions for any topics you would like us to discuss in future episodes. And thank you again for listening to the Grow Your Business podcast, and we'll see you again soon. Bye, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Grow Your Business. Have a